This is a test for the Jane Austen lecture. Okay, here is our second lecture in the Jane Austen class, and this is about how Jane Austen fits into literary history. Is she a romantic, with a capital R, author, or a reactionary? Jane Austen wrote in the middle of the Romantic period of British literary history, which occurs from about 1798 to about 1830. Her novels are published around 1811 through 1815. But what came before Romanticism? And that was the Enlightenment, which is a global political and philosophical movement. In France, the Enlightenment is associated with philosophes such as Voltaire, Montaigne, Diderot, the encyclopedists, those kind of people. Philosophers, also political figures, also literary figures who are connected with this new philosophical movement. In England, major thinkers are John Locke, David Hume, Samuel Johnson, Francis Bacon, Isaac Newton. Again, mostly philosophers interested in political philosophy, people writing essays, but also scientists like Bacon and Newton. In America, major Enlightenment thinkers are Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson. Enlightenment thinkers sought to apply human reason and rationality to all human endeavors: government, society, science. They were especially critical of ignorance, superstition, and tyranny. Deism is associated with the Enlightenment. Many Enlightenment authors subscribe to the idea that a higher power may exist, but does not intervene in human affairs or the laws of the universe. Classical liberalism. This is the belief in individual rights and freedom from constraints by the state. The Bill of Rights, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, the Declaration of Independence, these are all political documents that are unbelievably influenced by this philosophy of classical liberalism, by the Enlightenment. These are absolute products of Enlightenment thinking. In literature, it's not just philosophy, it's not just history, it's not just political science. This period is referred to as the Augustan Age or Neoclassicism. So there are like 3 names for this period, depending on what you're talking about: the Enlightenment, the Augustan Age, or Neoclassicism. Each one is probably fine. Elements of neoclassicism in literature are very different than what we are probably used to thinking about. Neoclassicists valued reason, just like Enlightenment thinkers, following the rules, and harmony. They also felt that art should be didactic. In other words, art should be enjoyable, it should be pleasant, but it should instruct you. You should learn some kind of lesson. It should have a morality to it. They valued imitation over originality. This is very different to our current values, but they felt that it was better to imitate something good that somebody else had done than to come up with something new on your own. They valued restraint, refinement, and rationality. And they also valued religious belief and expressions of piety. And this is somewhat connected to that idea about literature being didactic, about learning a lesson. Preferably, that lesson will be a religious lesson. Major authors of this period include Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope, Fanny Burney, Samuel Richardson, and Samuel Johnson. This is from the preface to Samuel Richardson's novel Pamela, which was written in 1740, one of the first fully fledged novels in English literature. So Richardson says that his novel is going to, quote, divert and entertain, and at the same time to instruct and improve the minds of the youth of both sexes. Pamela, the novel, will paint vice in its proper colors to make it deservedly odious, and to set virtue in its own amiable light to make it truly lovely, and to effect all these good ends in so probable, so natural, so lively a manner as shall engage the passions of every sensible reader and strongly interest them in the edifying story. So we can see that connection to that neoclassical value of didacticism, that you're going to learn some kind of lesson. It's going to be entertaining, but you're also going to learn something. We have morality here, we have vice, we have virtue. And this should also remind you of what we talked about with the rise of the novel, that it's going to be realistic, it's going to be probable, right? It's going to be natural, it's going to be believable. So, sensibility is a very important word for this class and the Age of Reason. So it's worthwhile defining it. The Oxford English Dictionary defines sensibility as in the 18th and early 19th century. Afterwards, the word isn't used this way anymore outside the early 19th century. Capacity for refined emotion, delicate sensitiveness of taste, also a readiness to feel compassion for suffering and to be moved by the pathetic in literature and art. So while you might have thought sensibility meant like having a lot of common sense, it kind of means exactly the opposite. It means being really sensitive to other people's feelings, and feeling a lot of compassion for other people. So the Enlightenment, the Augustan Age, it's not just reason all the time. There were reactions within this period, reactions against this emphasis on reason, on the mind. Sometimes it's also called, we see something called the Age of Sensibility, especially the second half of the 18th century. This can also be referred to as the cult of sensibility, and this focused on the ability to feel sympathy and pity as a sign of superior imagination, refinement, and morality. Now, refinement and morality, those were things that neoclassicists really liked, but this idea of your emotions, of feeling sympathy, of feeling pity, of having your passions moved, that was something that like very strict neoclassicists did not like at all, because they felt that reason and passion were antithetical to each other. So we can see how this develops out of Enlightenment thinking or neoclassical values, like the value of morality, the value of refinement, but it's focused on emotion rather than reason. And that emotion is a sign of superior imagination. Kind of like being the princess and the pea. Like you're so fancy, you're so delicate, you're so sensitive that you just feel these emotions more strongly. You're special, in other words. We get the rise of the sentimental novel. Pamela, that novel, the preface to which I just quoted. Clarissa, also by Richardson, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Julie. These are all sentimental novels. So for all of that preface, which sounded so neoclassical, it's going to be virtuous, it's going to be vice, Pamela is really a sentimental novel focused on sensibility, dressing itself up a little bit in that preface in neoclassical clothing. Richardson probably knows that a lot of neoclassicists would not necessarily approve of what he was going to write in Pamela, and so he tries to emphasize that his novel is going to be more moral than perhaps it actually is, because the whole novel is about an employer who's trying to rape his maid. So, as you read for Wednesday, I want you to think about how you have 3 texts for Wednesday: Pomfret's poem, Johnson's essay, and Mackenzie's novel, the little excerpt that you have. Either exhibit elements of neoclassicism or are reacting to elements of neoclassicism. And come to class with a place from any one of these 3 texts that you feel illustrates either an element of neoclassicism or the cult of sensibility. Thank you guys, and I will see you in class on Wednesday.